I'm Dan Langan, and I could turn anything into a cake. That's why Food Network challenges me every week to a brand new cake baking challenge. This is Dan Can Bake It. I have a brand new challenge box here, right from Food Network. I'm gonna open it up and see what's inside. This is a first on Dan Can Bake It. This is an entire plate of food. Oh my God, I love barbecue. Oh, there's actually a clue. I was so distracted by the food. Let's see what the clue says. Make a cake that looks seriously like meat, inspired by Michael Symon's new restaurant. Yes, I know Michael Symon is a big meat and barbecue restaurateur guy. If I'm gonna make a cake that looks like meat, it's going to have to be giant. It's gonna have to be realistic in texture and color. I've made a cake that looked like a giant rack of ribs. I've made plenty of cheeseburger cakes. I think what I have to do for this one though is sit down with this plate of meat, grab a drink, maybe eat a little bit. I'll do a little brainstorm and I'll see what I come up with. What I'm gonna do is create this cake modeled after my favorite cast iron skillet, filled with a bubbly gelatin oil glaze and a cake covered in crushed up corn cereal to make realistic looking fried chicken. So for the part that I'm really excited for, it's the fried chicken cutlets made out of cake. I'm just gonna take a sheet cake, it's nice and thin, kind of freehand, cut out some shapes. And then I'll go for another one that's more like a drumstick. I'll just round these a little bit. Now what I wanna do is just take some ivory buttercream and I'm just gonna frost these really rough. I only need enough buttercream to be able to stick some corn cereal to these, and I'm just using ivory so that if any of that buttercream pokes through, it's not this really like jarring white. Everything will kind of match a little nicer. So I think that's actually just enough buttercream. What I have right here is just some crushed up cornflakes. I'm just gonna sprinkle a nice bit on top. I'm adding much more than I need, and then I'll just kind of push it into place. They're literally the perfect texture. I know a lot of people actually use real cornflakes for their chicken, and for cake, it works well too. Get rid of this extra cereal. And it's really that simple, but these aren't done yet. I wanna add some color to them, make them look freshly fried. So what I wanna do is just chill these. So I've got my chicken pieces nice and cold, so they're really easy to handle. What I wanna do is give them a little more texture and make them like really nicely chunky breaded chickens just by kind of cutting into the chicken and peeling back little pieces. It's always like the best pieces of fried chicken are the ones that you fry last because the breading and the flour gets all clumpy. I think this really kind of emulates that texture. I have my airbrush machine and I have some ivory food color, and I'll kind of highlight some of those edges just a little bit. I'm just gonna grab some cocoa powder, which is one of my favorite things to use to add brown hues. These are just the spots where the chicken cooked like a little longer than the rest of it. I really think it's the little details like this, that little bit of extra time, that really makes food cakes look super realistic. These I'm just gonna pop in the fridge so that they're nice and firm, so once my cake is ready, I literally can just pluck these up and pop them right in the center. This is my cake right here, and it's actually a little tricky because it might look like a really high cake, but only this half right here is actually cake. This whole thing right here is a stack of cardboards. I call it like a cake extender. Whenever I want fondant to drape over a cake and I want a lot of excess, I use an extender. First thing I wanna do is take this thing and split it into two pieces. Push this to the side for a second. I wanna roll out a little bit of black fondant, and I'll just knead this till it's nice and soft, and I'll put down some cornstarch so it doesn't stick. I wanna make this sticky, but I don't want my table to be sticky. I'm just gonna spray some vodka on top of this. This goes right on top, and I'll smooth this out. Now I can take my scalpel. I'm just gonna cut it flush with my cake. So one more time, I'll flip this thing over. Actually, I'm lying. I'll probably flip it plenty more times, but for now. So I have a piece of, this is too big. Before I put this extender piece back on though, I just wanna add a piece of parchment, a fresh circle of parchment, just as extra insurance that these two pieces come back apart when I want them to. A little shortening on top of the parchment so that the extender sticks together. Put this back into place. I'm just gonna paint it with some piping gel. So I'm just gonna rub some shortening on the extender part so that the fondant doesn't permanently stick to it. And I'm actually gonna do a two-tone fondant rollout. So I'm actually modeling this whole cake after my favorite cast iron skillet, which is one of those really cool enameled skillets that's black cast iron on the inside, but then has a cool color on the outside. What I wanna do is add some Tylose powder to this fondant so it stiffens up a little bit. I'll start rolling out the black. I'll make sure I put plenty of cornstarch down. I'm gonna slide this whole thing out of the way. So I'll do the same thing with some orange. I'm gonna add a little bit of this Tylose powder. And I also want to pop any air bubbles if I see them. Take my black, I just want to flip the whole thing over. I'm just using the vodka to make this sticky so that the orange will stick to it, just to kind of get that nice and evenly on there. Pop any air bubbles that are kind of stuck between the two pieces. Sometimes it's actually easier to feel the air bubbles than to try and look for them. Kind of try and push out any air bubbles. Kind of buff this whole thing or kind of give it a smooth. Some extra fondant is good for that. I'm pretty happy with how this looks. What I want to do is pop the whole thing in the fridge, let it get really nice and firm, then I can flip it over for the last time. It's a heavy one. Before I flip this whole thing over, what I want to do is just put a cardboard on the bottom. Just a little bit of piping gel should make this cardboard stick. Flip it over. Now what I want to just do is just push all of this up. It feels like shaping a pizza. I'll take a scalpel and cut all the way around. And having this cardboard still intact is really helpful because it's like a great guide for me to rest my knife on so that I get a nice even cut all the way around, just like that. Yes. I'm just kind of rocking my finger back and forth, kind of make a spout, and then I want to do the same thing just opposite, directly the first one. So what I have are two handle pieces. Use some extra fondant. Stick this right about there. I'll use my sculpting tool just to kind of smooth these seams out, kind of work those together. This is just sculpture wire that I use when I want to add stability to cakes. I'll get a piece of fondant nice and soft, and I'll stick this to the wire before I add the handle. So let's see if this works here. And don't forget, if you try to make this cake, don't eat the handle because there is wire in it for support. I'll just grab some freeze spray. It's great to kind of freeze fondant right in the spot where it is. I think I just want to use 3 pieces. I don't want to overcrowd my pan, you never want to do that. Let me just pick out my favorites. I have some neutral glaze, which is really just simple syrup with gelatin added to it. You melt it down until it's the consistency of oil. Now is actually whisk this up. All of that air starts to get trapped in the glaze as it cools, so I can pour this really bubbly glaze at the corners or the edges of the chicken. Coconut oil spray, I'll spray it on the chicken. It's gonna get nice and shiny, and then if I spray a little on the glaze, the bubbles kind of get stuck in the glaze and they set that way, and it's like permanent frying bubbles. Cool. Oh yeah. So I really don't think this thing could look any cooler, but what it actually does need is just a little bit of airbrush, and I'll take some orange spray color, a little bit right on the top. Darken this just towards the base. So I'm really thrilled with how this looks. I don't want to add too much airbrush because I don't want to go overboard. I just think the color and the texture and this bubbling could be one of the most realistic food cakes that I've ever created. All the hard work, all the figuring it out, it's just so worth it just standing back and taking a look at it. My challenge was to create a cake that seriously looked like meat, inspired by Michael Symon's new restaurant. I created a cake modeled after my favorite cast iron skillet and corn-coated chicken pieces that look like real chicken. My mouth is watering for a slice of this chicken, so I'm gonna go in for some. Just kidding, it's just cake. I'm gonna get a slice of this real cake though. I want a nice, big, juicy slice. Oh, and it's chocolate on the inside. It's my favorite. Chocolate and vanilla, yeah. Perfect mix. Oh my gosh. It's like this perfect balance, sweet and crunchy. Chocolate cake and cornflakes. It's like probably my new favorite combo, so good. Michael Symon, what do you think? You wanna bring this cake to your new restaurant? So don't forget to subscribe to Food Network, and if you have an idea for my next challenge, let me know in the comments below.